what this country is about. And this is what Americans are about. A little bit more of this and a little bit less of the partisanship and the ugliness, and this country would be a better place.
Self-portrait of America. A wall of protective face masks unveiled by New York's governor, sent to him unsolicited from people across the country. Breaking news tonight about the drug remdesivir. How it can possibly help infected patients recover faster. Dr. Anthony Fauci in a crowded Oval Office today with President Trump, going over the results of a drug trial that he says is, quote, really opening the door.
And I can guarantee you, as more people, more companies, more investigators get involved, it's going to get better and better.
The Philadelphia woman who's single-handedly shaking up the notion of who can get a COVID-19 test. And the Red Cross with a new concern about the pandemic's impact on African-American blood donations and what that shortage means for sickle cell patients. Stepping forward, the woman who says Joe Biden sexually assaulted her at his Senate office in 1993, an allegation his campaign vehemently denies.
Stop, stop, stop.
New video of a white police officer violently detaining a black 14-year-old. Former presidential candidate and prosecutor Senator Kamala Harris calls it a horrific abuse of power as the video goes viral. And boomtowns going bust as the price of oil dips to historic lows.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for streaming with us. I'm Lindsay Davis. A sobering reality check tonight. The coronavirus has now killed more Americans than the Vietnam War. More than 60,000 deaths in the U.S. due to COVID-19. Here in New York, the number of hospitalizations is slowly declining, but in just 24 hours, 330 people have died. In Illinois, cases there still rising. In 6 out of the past 7 days, more than 2,000 new cases each day. In Miami-Dade County in Florida, however, parks and golf courses back open for business. But we begin tonight with the remarkable disparity that exists in this country, both racially and economically. Earlier this week, the governor of Pennsylvania called for more testing for minority and vulnerable populations. While major health institutions have not yet succeeded in doing that, one woman in Philadelphia is taking on the task and taking the tests to the streets.
It's fitting that you can find Dr. Ayla Stanford at church. No, she's not a pastor, though some have called her a saint. And many here in Philadelphia will tell you she's doing God's work.
Hallelujah that God made a way.
Gwen Carter is about to be tested for COVID-19.
I'm deeply grateful, whatever the outcome of this test may be. You wouldn't know it if you wasn't here to do it.
So far, Dr. Stanford has tested more than 1,500 people in the city of brotherly love and counting.
How was it?
Beautiful.
Oh, okay, I'll take it.
No referrals, no car, no money, no problem. Here in her hometown of Philadelphia, blacks make up the majority of the population and nearly half of the coronavirus cases.
So many of us are face-front employees at the grocery stores and the post office and driving the buses and cleaning the hospital or working in the hospital. So we don't have an option to work from home.
While many are talking about how COVID-19 disproportionately sickens and kills those in black and brown communities, Dr. Stanford is taking action.
I just couldn't be part of another town hall meeting or watch another webinar or talk about how pervasive the social determinants of health are and not do anything.
So she rented a van. As a pediatric surgeon in private practice, she already had access to some tests and PPE.
I had some gowns and masks and gloves and things like that. Then I reached out to 2 doctors who I know and trust implicitly and asked if they would come along. They said yes. And then we had some medical students from Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine that wanted to join up, and we got our team together. So it took literally 48 hours to get it together.
Her husband got in the driver's seat, and they hit the streets.
So you went old school. You started making house calls.
Yeah, absolutely. We went to the people.
And just like that, the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium was born, a group of medical professionals who assemble in church parking lots with protective gear and highly coveted coronavirus tests.
We basically set up like a triage unit, if you will. Every time we go, we pack up everything. It comes out of the van. We put everything up. We have a registration site and supplies table and accessioning to make sure all of our specimens are perfect.
This is the scene everywhere they go.
People are showing up, hundreds of cars waiting before you even open.
Absolutely. They are. They are. I mean, the need is great. It just confirms for us that we're exactly where we need to be testing these communities.
This is day 4 of running the operation. We've got 200 people on the parking lot even before we open.
People who otherwise may not have access to a test.
It is the result of decades or even centuries of the way we are treating poor people and the way we are treating minorities.
Philadelphia, the birthplace of America and home of the Liberty Bell. But for all of its fanfare, it's also the poorest big city in the country, and the racial and economic disparities are evident.
What we found in Philadelphia is that there were areas where the number of tests that were being conducted per 1,000 people was about 5 or 4 times higher than in the poorer areas.
Dr. Usama Bilal, an epidemiologist at Drexel University, tracked who's getting tested here by zip code. He found residents in Philadelphia's wealthiest zip code, Center City, were 5 times more likely to get tested than those in North Philadelphia, home to some of the city's poorest zip codes.
So while people in poorer zip codes are not getting tested as often, you found that they're testing positive more often when they do get tested. Is that right?
Exactly. So the proportion of those tests that was positive is higher in those poorer zip codes.
A trend, he says, is not unique to Philadelphia, but exists in data found from New York to Barcelona. The number of positives tends to be higher in poorer areas.
I call it the epidemic that never ends. Like one day we will get out of coronavirus. I'm sure we will get out of it, we'll mitigate it, we'll do something, we'll get with the vaccine, etc. The epidemic that we really need to control long term is social inequality. And that, has centuries of history. It has many different intersecting axes. So there is racism, there is classism, there is gender discrimination. There are many, many things going on there. And those things, when they intersect, they really cause disease.
And now the Red Cross is flagging a new concern. Prior to this pandemic, they say blood donations from African Americans were already low, accounting for just 4% of overall donations. But now the Red Cross tells ABC News they're facing a dire shortage of donations from black donors, which have dropped by 50%, now accounting for just 2% of all donations.
It's not uncommon for children and adults with sickle cell disease to need monthly blood transfusions to prevent strokes and acute chest, which is a pneumonia-like illness. It is very important that they receive blood that is very like their own.
Among those diagnosed with sickle cell disease, 98% are black.
African American donors can be unique heroes to individuals with sickle cell disease because they have proteins on their red cell that are very much like the proteins that sit on the red cells of my patients. So it's very important that they donate blood.
At Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, one of the country's largest comprehensive sickle cell centers, they're donating thousands of masks and hand sanitizers to the families of young people with the disease.
And because individuals with sickle cell disease have to come to the hospital at times to get blood transfusions or to get blood tests or for sick visits, we want to make sure that they can get to the hospital as safely as possible. So we put these care packages together with fabric face coverings for a parent and a child and hand sanitizer so that they could get to the hospital safely.
Meanwhile, Dr. Stanford is hoping her work out in the community will prevent some from having to make a trip to the hospital by early detection and limiting the spread.
We are getting our results back already, and there are a lot of positives.
Just last week, Dr. Stanford and her team tested more than 360 people here at this megachurch.
We're here at Enon Tabernacle Church, a great need in the community for testing for COVID-19. It has been one of access, availability, and education. And we're trying to provide all three here today.
It was like great adventure. There were so many cars. And we knew we only had 350 plus kits, so we had to turn people away.
Enon is the largest church in Philadelphia with roughly 12,000 members, helmed by Pastor Alan Waller.
Even before we hit the peak of the coronavirus, I know we're going to make it.
For weeks now, Pastor Waller's been streaming from an empty sanctuary, and he says he hasn't had any symptoms of COVID-19.
I'm just one of the people.
In fact, his rationale for getting tested was simply to encourage members of this underserved community to also get tested.
So I was just doing it not expecting to be positive, but expecting to just show people that it really doesn't hurt when it goes up your nose. And so the last thing I expected to get last week was a positive result.
A result he wasn't expecting from a test he likely wouldn't have taken were it not for Dr. Ayla Stanford.
I think I'm on assignment because I don't feel bad and I can speak up for people that may not feel good enough to speak up. We need testing. We need a lot of testing because had I not taken that test, I would have been one walking around, shedding, and potentially infecting someone who would have a worse experience with this same virus.
Undeterred, he's still preaching, now from home.
Sometimes God calls time out. Sometimes God will tell all of us, listen, it's time to sit down. We know that when America catches a cold, the Black community has pneumonia. And so we have to take extra steps to make sure that the message gets out. It's a twofold message. It's a challenge to the system to recognize the disparities that exist already. It's a challenge to our community to recognize that this is real, and we have to take responsibility for our own health.
Taking responsibility for the health and well-being in this community is exactly what Dr. Stanford is doing.
For my doctors and friends in other cities, you can do this. You can do this. And hopefully you have the support of your local and state government. But if you don't, you can do it.
Why are you angry?
I'm angry because maybe a week, I think a week is enough time for a government with doctors and nurses and epidemiologists and MPH people and folks with money could put something together like this. The most vulnerable are, in this sense, are elderly, but African Americans are also vulnerable. And I don't see the resources, I don't even see the action or the movement into getting people tested.
Until then, it's Dr. Stanford to the rescue. With a quick tilt of their head and 5-second swab of the nose.
Now I'm going to turn it 5 times. Relax and breathe.
All further proof that superheroes really don't need capes.
Perfect.
This masked woman is saving lives just the same.
I think it's the most marvelous, wonderful thing that God laid on your heart to do.
Dr. Stanford, a blessing for so many. And a reminder from the Red Cross tonight that the need is great, and African Americans, as well as people of all races, are being urged to donate blood. And now to breaking developments in the battle to beat the virus. The antiviral drug remdesivir that's been showing life-saving promise in treating COVID-19 has been the subject of a trial. And today, Dr. Anthony Fauci called the results highly significant. While the study still needs to be peer-reviewed, Fauci added that it proves that a drug can block the virus. Our Tom Yamas has the latest.
Tonight, fresh hope in the fight against coronavirus. The country's top infectious disease doctor, Anthony Fauci, announcing at the White House early trial results of the drug treatment remdesivir shows promise.
The data shows that remdesivir has a clear-cut, significant positive effect in diminishing the time to recovery. This is really quite important. It's highly significant.
The drug, originally tested for Ebola, now showing in an NIH study it may be effective against COVID-19.
What it is proven is that a drug can block this virus.
Certainly it's a positive. It's a very positive event.
The research now needs to be peer-reviewed. For weeks, we've heard from patients who have recovered from the virus after using remdesivir. COVID-19 put 55-year-old father Chris Kane in the hospital with a high fever. He was put on oxygen. That's when he was offered the drug.
I was feeling pretty bad, so I said, sure, let's give it a shot.
Can you remember the moment the medication kicked in?
I woke up in the morning and I could breathe, and it still hurt, but it had dropped off quite a bit. So yeah, it was literally 2 days later when all of a sudden I went, wow, I'm feeling better.
Kane says in his case, he felt no side effects. The drug will now be offered to all patients.
Whenever you have clear-cut evidence that a drug works, you have an ethical obligation to immediately let the people who are in the placebo group know so that they could have access. And all of the other trials that are taking place now have a new standard of care.
And in the race towards a vaccine, pharma giant Pfizer announcing their vaccine could be tested as early as next week and available for emergency use in the fall. Effective vaccine and treatments could not come soon enough. The death toll topping 60,000, more American lives lost than in the Vietnam War. And the CDC now says the number of deaths in 7 states hard hit by the virus is 9,000 higher than earlier reported.
It could be another year or more before we get really final hard estimates of what the burden looks like.
States now figuring out how to safely reopen. 11 states have already eased restrictions. 7 more states will by the end of the week. And tonight in New York, a grim reminder of the devastating toll. The streets around this Brooklyn funeral home closed after neighbors complained about a stench from bodies stored in trailers. The funeral director saying they have run out of space. This as city officials in New York are urging residents to practice social distancing after crowds gathered to watch the Blue Angels and Thunderbirds fly over. And overnight, mourners packed the streets of Brooklyn for an Orthodox Jewish funeral. The mayor warning they could make arrests.
We have to understand what it means to hold a large gathering in New York City today. It means, unfortunately, that people who go to that gathering, some will be sick with this disease. It's just a fact.
Every day, 1,000 New Yorkers are still pouring into hospitals.
We don't want to see 1,000 new cases every day. We'd like to see that in the low hundreds.
Still, weary doctors and nurses celebrating every victory against this disease.
I am a coronavirus survivor, and thanks for everybody that saved my life. And I'm going home today.
75-year-old Sonia Atia was put on a ventilator at Mount Sinai, Queens.
She came to us initially with shortness of breath. She could barely breathe.
On her granddaughter's 6th birthday, after 2 weeks, Sonia wheeled out of that hospital to Cheers, able to head home to reunite with her family.
And Tom Yamas joins us now. Tom, certainly promising news today, but how will patients get access to the drug?
Right, Lindsay. Well, it's available to patients in hospitals. The makers of the drug say they hope to meet and exceed their production goals. We're talking about more than 100,000 medical treatment courses by May, more than 500,000 by October. Medical experts we spoke to say those are very encouraging numbers. And the patient we spoke to today tells us that he received the drug via an IV every day. Lindsay, he said it was like his morning coffee.
Hopeful news there. Tom Yamas for us. Thanks so much. Turning now to the economy, a new report out today estimates that in the first quarter this year, the GDP shrank by 4.8%. That's the largest decline in the economy since the Great Recession in 2008. But the stock market continued its rise from March lows on the heels of that positive news on the drug remdesivir. The Dow up more than 500 points today. Let's bring in ABC News Chief Business and Economics correspondent Rebecca Jarvis to discuss this with us. Rebecca, let's start with that GDP number. The drop was expected, but this doesn't really reflect the full impact of COVID-19 on the economy. What should we expect going forward as far as how bad it'll get and as far as the economy growing again?
Well, what's really stunning about this number, Lindsay, is that it was actually even worse than some had anticipated, and it really only accounts for a couple weeks worth of the statewide shutdowns that we've seen across the country, because it goes from January to March, and really only a few of those weeks are accounted for in that 4.8% decline in the overall economy for the U.S. The second quarter, which is the one that we're in right now, by many predictions, will decline by more than 20%. And the big question is not so much even how much of a decline we see right now, but how much of an increase we see in the third quarter, which comes after all of this. And the reason being that right now we know with business basically grinded to a halt across most of the country, that number is going to come down more. The question is, how quickly do things get back up and running, and how many people? We know that 26 million people laid off over the course of 4 weeks during this crisis. How many of those people get their jobs back quickly? And there are analysts that anticipate that it's going to be a quick response, that it will be a very quick and dramatic hiring back, but not everybody is on board with that. I think when you look at the stock market today, one of the things that's really reflected are those Gilead results on remdesivir, because of this idea that if there is some form of therapy that would lessen the symptoms of coronavirus, lessen the amount of time that people spend in hospitals, that would be a reason that we could have a little bit more confidence that the system can get back up and running faster.
And the Federal Reserve signaled today that it will keep interest rates near zero. But beyond any economic policy, is it fair to say that the economy is entirely tied to us getting this virus under control?
100%. And Fed Chair Powell even said that the virus is the #1 thing. Whether the economy bounces back quickly is 100% on that virus timeline. How quickly we can get testing, how quickly we can get therapies, how quickly there will be a vaccine. Second to that is how U.S. consumers respond to the fact that there is high unemployment right now, how businesses respond to the rehiring of those consumers. And then finally, we don't live in a vacuum, Lindsay. We live in a worldwide economy, and right now the entire worldwide economy is hurting from this virus, and that has an impact here on the U.S. as well. If the world is contracting, if the world economy is slowing down, all of the businesses here in the U.S. that do business around the globe also see their business slow down, and that ends up trickling down to the very employees who work for those companies here in the U.S. having less of a need to do their jobs, and ultimately that amounts to job loss here in the U.S.
Right, one big trickle-down effect. Rebecca Jarvis, thank you as always for your insight. We appreciate it. And when we come back, why some districts are choosing to end what's left of the school year early and the impact it could have on students. Plus, while many other aspects of our lives have changed, one important ritual isn't going anywhere. How we're paying tribute to our fallen heroes during this pandemic. And a decision today that could change the face of college sports forever. ESPN's Jay Billis will tell us where we go from here. But first, our tweet of the day. Tom Hanks, who contracted coronavirus in Australia, now donating plasma to help others fighting the virus.
Most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news. Straight to the heart of the story. ABC News. Straightforward.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis. 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home. David, nice to meet you. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, I'm grateful you woke up this morning.
Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning, sunshine. We've been waiting for you. Say good morning. Good morning, sunshine. In America, say good morning. I want you to wake me up.
Right now,
do you make sense of it all? Now, afternoons on ABC, one place with the good information you need.
We are all in this together, and we're going to get through this together.
Pandemic, what you need to know. Afternoons at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC.
Welcome back. Tonight, disturbing new video of an officer taking down a 14-year-old. Take a look.
Bro, stop, bro. What's your password? What's your... Stop, Josh, stop.
This video gained traction online and spurred an investigation. That's an officer in Rancho Cordova, California, forcefully holding the teen to the ground and ultimately punching him. Officials say the officer had, quote, reasonable suspicion the young man was involved in criminal activity, and says when he was uncooperative, the officer tried to keep him in custody without handcuffs until backup arrived. California Senator Kamala Harris reposted the video and tweeted, "This is a horrific abuse of power. This officer must be held accountable." Turning now to another fallout from this pandemic that's unfolding in millions of homes nationwide. Teachers, students, and parents all trying to figure out remote learning on the fly. But for so many, it's just not working. And some districts and parents are saying enough, calling it quits on the school year early. Our Steve Osensami has more.
In parts of Georgia, some districts like Bibb County, an hour south of Atlanta, are ending their school year as early as Friday. Students from too many families often didn't have the right equipment or internet access to make it work.
I think that it's a smart decision to end the school year early.
And next month, they're pulling the plug on remote learning in D.C. too, ending what's left of the school year 3 weeks early.
They're just getting the learning done and closing up shop. So it makes sense to me.
In New York City, they're concerned about giving students failing grades after this unusual semester. So they're announcing a revised grading system. For many students, letter grades are out. From kindergarten through 5th grade, it's either meeting standards or needs improvement. New York high schoolers get a choice, the existing grading scale or pass-fail.
We have to understand the moment, be flexible about the moment, but also hold those high expectations.
In California, they're debating whether to start the school year early next year to make up for learning that's been lost.
We are considering the prospect of an even earlier school year into the fall. As early as late July, early August.
In a draft from the CDC shared by the Associated Press, we're learning what they suggest schools should look like when classes start back. Putting desks 6 feet apart, avoiding field trips and school assemblies, and having students eat lunch in their classrooms instead of the cafeteria.
Our thanks to Steve Osensami for that report. And that plan that you heard from the CDC, it's still a draft, so the suggestions could be revised. But clearly, we're talking about a new normal for so many of us. Up next, from boom to bust, how the historic drop in the price of oil led to disaster for one town in West Texas. Plus, new evidence suggests that coronavirus deaths and infections, they might be much higher than we think, why we could be undercounting an already staggering death toll. Stay with us.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange. Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew. Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. No bull, no spin. Now imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward.
Can you tell us your full name for the record?
Jeffrey Edward Epstein.
Every girl that meets Jeffrey starts off with giving him a massage. He's like, I'll pay you $200 for every girl that you bring to me.
Who else was underage?
All of them.
All of them?
He told me the younger the better.
How did he get so rich? How did he get away with it for so long? And what do the women who survived his crimes now have to say? Truth and Lies, Jeffrey Epstein. Listen free now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back. While the death count from the coronavirus is already staggering, there's alarming evidence that we're actually undercounting the real number of COVID-19 deaths and infections, possibly by tens of thousands. We take a closer look by the numbers. In the U.S., more than 60,000 people have died from COVID-19 and more than 1 million have been infected, according to Johns Hopkins University. However, less than 2% of all Americans have been tested for the virus to date, according to White House figures. Experts say far more testing is needed to assess the full scope of the outbreak. The actual death count in New York and New Jersey may be as many as 3 times higher than the official tally. Researchers believe that many deaths attributed to other causes were actually COVID-19 related. For example, New York City added 3,700 new coronavirus deaths when it included suspected and not just lab-confirmed cases, as well as at-home deaths. And when we come back, Get Off My Runway, actor Harrison Ford's run-in with air traffic control. Plus, a major move by the NCAA could change college sports as we know it. But first, here are some of the trending headlines on abcnews.com.
Right now, this is part of the eye wall.
This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis, 18,000 tons.
Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael. You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Another week in America, a country facing a new test now.
The Wuhan airport, almost no one here.
The last flight out of Rome.
This is the nursing home just outside Seattle.
Dozens of people were just rushed off this cruise ship.
This is ground zero.
It is shut down.
Another ambulance just pulled out.
Now they're headed to the hospital.
Time is of the essence.
You can see the ship behind me.
This is the first time tests have been done here.
Morning, afternoon, evening, late night, 24/7. ABC News. There for you.
Thank you to the doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals,
and first responders.
Thank you to everyone keeping our supermarkets, pharmacies, gas stations running.
Thank you to all the essential workers for all that you do.
Thank you.
We thank you.
We thank you. We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all you do.
And with every challenge, question, concern, we'll be here for you every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Because we will
get through this together.
The FDA is moving to reauthorize emergency use of a coronavirus treatment using the drug remdesivir. That after a government-run trial of the drug had good initial results. Dr. Anthony Fauci at the White House today says it is good news, saying he's cautiously optimistic.
Looking forward, this is very optimistic.
Delivered through an IV, it was created to fight Ebola and is known to have few side effects.
The data shows that remdesivir has a clear-cut, significant positive effect in diminishing the time to recovery. It is a very important proof of concept because what it is proven is that a drug can block this virus.
However, experts caution these are early results and it's not a miracle cure. That announcement as the U.S. death toll from COVID-19 approached 60,000. And ABC News has learned the nationwide death toll could be double that because of complications in determining causes of deaths. And states are still fighting to ramp up testing as they weigh the decision to reopen. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo still pushing for federal help, criticizing Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for saying states should file for bankruptcy instead of getting a blue state bailout.
No blue state bailout. What is he trying to say? The states that have coronavirus are Democratic states. And he's a Republican, so he doesn't want to help the Democratic states.
With states still under stay-at-home orders or moving towards phased-in reopenings, President Trump at the White House today says he thinks once the cases of coronavirus are down and states open up, the economy will be on the upswing. In the first 3 months of this year, the nation's economy shrank by an annual rate of 4.8%. The Federal Reserve Board says it will keep interest rates unchanged for the time being. Rates are between 0 and 0.25%.
Harrison Ford under investigation by the FAA. Authorities say the actor and pilot was involved in a runway incursion at Hawthorne Airport in L.A., misunderstanding the air traffic controller, taxiing across the runway as another plane was taking off.
Get across that runway now. I told you to hold short. You need to listen up.
Excuse me, sir. I thought exactly the opposite. I'm terribly sorry.
The two planes were never close. Ford has had several incidents while flying, including a forced landing on a golf course in 2015.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the birth of his baby boy with his fiancée Carrie Simmons. Johnson went back to work on Monday after recovering from COVID-19.
Whatever differences we have in this House, Mr. Speaker, as human beings, I think we all recognise the anxiety that the Prime Minister and Carrie must have gone through in these past few weeks. Unimaginable anxiety.
Tonight, we're taking a closer look at a part of the country suffering a 1-2 punch in the middle of this pandemic. America's oil fields. We've reported on the historic drop in crude oil prices. At one point, the price fell to a shocking negative $37 a barrel. But beyond the numbers, the collapse in oil has had devastating consequences for so many people whose livelihoods are now in jeopardy. ABC's Marcus Moore brings us this story of the hard-hit area trying to cope with the fallout.
By the time the sun rises over West Texas, many of the pump jacks that dot the bare terrain have already been working overnight. And what they bring from deep below the surface has made dreams possible.
It's made lots of dreams come true. Certainly made mine come true.
But today, for so many, their dreams are on hold.
Nobody that I knew saw this coming.
The price of oil right now, I mean, it's killing us. It's absolutely killing us.
How long can you forecast I can hang on? And I mean, that's the unknown.
Tonight, the story of a perfect storm, an unprecedented collapse in the price of oil mixed with a pandemic that's claimed lives and gutted the global demand for crude, putting livelihoods in jeopardy amidst an uncertain future.
Now you're looking at millions of dollars worth of equipment just sitting here. You get millions and millions of dollars worth of paperweights. Obviously not making any money if it's sitting here.
Jesse Lane is the chief operator of Nimble Crane in Pecos, Texas, one of the many service companies that support the oil and gas industry. However, their work has dropped off dramatically.
Planes aren't flying, cruise ships aren't sailing, buses aren't moving.
Lane says there were signs of trouble long before the pandemic hit. An international price war driving the global supply of oil up and prices down. The situation only worsened by the sudden fall in demand. Lane says a simple drive makes it all clear. Just a couple of months ago, there was near gridlock from trucks heading to drilling sites passing through this four-way stop in Orla, Texas.
This is Orla, Texas today. That same intersection virtually empty. It is perhaps the most vivid illustration of how this economic slowdown has impacted this community and so many others across West Texas.
When you look at it sitting here and you get knocked back 2 years, it's depressing.
Just like a switch, it all changed. He's had to lay off dozens of workers. To have to tell someone, one of your employees, that they're no longer working, I know that must be the hardest thing you've ever had to do.
The guys that work here, they know when it's busy, they know when it's slow. So when you call somebody into your office when it's slow, they know that's probably what's happening. And when you have to tell them that they have to go home with no job, it's very, very tough. Very, very tough. Toughest thing I do.
We have no choice but things to go up.
Mike Bowman is a crane operator. He's one of the few still employed. He travels back and forth between West Texas and Alabama, staying in a small camper on company property. Today, he's packing to head back home, knowing full well the possibility he might not get called back if things get worse.
At any point, the owners could show up and say, hey, look, we just can't afford to do this anyway. And I understand that. I mean, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to make money, you're not trying to lose money.
You've got, a $100,000 investment in each one of these things parked.
That is an eventuality Bob Stewart vows to avoid, his welding company in Andrews, Texas.
My granddad started this business 77 years ago.
He and his wife Denise bought the company from his grandfather in 1997. They've weathered ups and downs before, but this one is admittedly different. The stunning fall in April, the price of a barrel of oil dipped to negative $37.
When I saw it go negative, I told Denise that night, I said, we're not going to have a job tomorrow, not one.
Albeit slightly, prices have edged back up.
I never thought I'd be happy to see $2 oil.
But Stewart grapples with the pressing questions about how he will ensure his business survives, how to keep workers here employed well into the future.
That's the frightening part for me, Marcus, is the guy that has to make these decisions for 110 people that are employed here. And that, if I make bad decisions, try to guide us forward, and we fail, we all fail.
Here, they've all agreed to take pay cuts to keep the company afloat until things turn around.
How many households are you picking up for?
Some oil and gas workers who just months ago sat in traffic to reach the oil fields are now in line at food giveaways like this one in Odessa.
When the oil price is dropping and coronavirus, it had just been one or the other, it wouldn't be so bad. But with both of them hitting, it's destroyed.
Stacy Collins told us he hasn't worked in over a month.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I was going to say, what has that been like, man?
Dying.
Like so many across the country, the food bank here expects the lines to potentially get even longer.
It's everything. It runs from somebody who makes $20 an hour to somebody who makes $200,000 a year doesn't have a job. And that is huge. And until the glut, until oil gets better, we're not going to be any better. We will continue to struggle.
There is a burning question here. When will it improve? And what will the industry look like afterwards? Stewart, who's been around this industry for decades, doesn't know, nor does anyone else we met here in West Texas.
How long is this going to last?
It's the $100,000 question, isn't it?
Hi! Nice to see you!
But in the face of real pain and uncertainty, there is hope in a new day as the sun sets once again on these fields in West Texas.
I don't know what it looks like. I'm sure we're all going to have some scars and some scrapes and some nicks and bruises, maybe 10 pounds lighter, but we're going to come out and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll have some scars and bruises, no doubt, but we will come out. Marcus joins us now. Marcus, towns like this are really hurting because they're so dependent on the oil industry. But even if things do start to reopen, the demand is unlikely to be there because so many people are out of work, right?
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. You know, oil and gas, it's the lifeblood of the economy here in West Texas. And then the feeling from people here is that even when the stores and the shops and restaurants and movie theaters open back up, there are still a lot of people who won't be able to go to those places because they don't have jobs. And that's one of the things that makes this current situation unique, because in downturns in the past, obviously the oil industry has been through the ups and downs over the decades, but in the past, the workers could perhaps simply go to another state like North Dakota or Alaska to do the same work. But right now, there simply are no jobs, so they can't go anywhere. And that is what is making this so difficult. And Jesse Lane, the gentleman who we met, who operates the crane company in Pecos, Texas, you know, he said that as people across the country are celebrating the lower gas prices, he hopes they remember that there are families that are struggling because of those low gas prices, and they are all hoping that they will have some relief soon.
Marcus, our thanks so much to you and the entire team for putting that piece together for us. Still ahead on ABC News Live, honoring our... And to continue this conversation about oil, I want to bring in Austin Goolsbee, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors and also an ABC News contributor. Austin, we just mentioned the historic drop in oil prices. How does that drop impact the average American and the broader economy?
Well, if you work at anything related to the oil business, it's going to be a tough period, as you might imagine. And if you work in any industry where they use oil, especially if you're in the oil storage business, it's going to be great. For the average American, I'd say you're still in this period of waiting. Why isn't the price of gas lower given how cheap the oil is per gallon? Eventually, probably gas prices are going to be historically low, but then you got nowhere to go. You know, you're still kind of locked in your houses.
And let's focus on those gas prices for a moment. Once we do get those lower prices, that may help the average person a little bit, but is that good for the overall economy?
Yeah, it's positive for some parts of the economy, and it's negative for other parts. In the old days, you know, the 70s, the 80s, when we had these big oil shocks, the price of oil went up, caused a big recession. So there are a lot of people who would look and say, well, if the price of oil goes down that much, maybe we'll get a boom. But unfortunately, one of the main reasons the price of oil is down so much is it's just reflecting the fact that our economy is really in free fall. So I don't think that this is going to be a great sign. If you were going to be taking a trip somewhere in your car, it's going to be a bit cheaper, but the overall impact for everyday people is not going to be that big, especially since we weren't driving that much right now.
And despite these big losses, oil prices have rebounded in recent days. What does that tell us about where the economy is headed?
Well, hopefully it's a sign that we're going to get some pickup. I think the price of oil futures for oil you're going to deliver in May was literally a negative number. And that was strange to say the least, but it was because all the storage is full. There's no place to put the oil. So people said, how much will you charge me for a barrel of oil? They say, you got to pay me to take it, because where am I going to put it? I think the fact that prices are going up a bit is a sign maybe there's a little bit of capacity opening up in storage, but the price of oil is really low. So the puzzle is more, why isn't it not getting to the consumers, and how long is it going to take to show up at the pump?
Right, because when I see that negative territory, I'm actually expecting you're going to like pay me to put gas in my car. I don't know where the lag is there, but hopefully we'll see it at some point. Austin Goolsbee, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Turning now to some news in the world of sports. The NCAA is moving toward a plan that would allow college athletes to finally earn money from endorsements and to cash in on their name, image, and likeness. So let's bring in ESPN college basketball analyst Jay Billis for more on this. Jay, thanks so much for talking with us.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
So there's still a lot that has to be worked out to make this official, but just explain to us what this rule change would potentially allow and what restrictions there would be on college athletes earning money.
Well, first, these are just recommendations that were made by a working group that was chaired by Val Ackerman and Gene Smith of the Big East and Ohio State, respectively. And it's in large measure a departure for the NCAA to allow athletes to benefit monetarily in any way beyond their expenses, their scholarship and a small stipend. So on one hand, this is quite a step forward for the NCAA to allow players to monetize their name, image, and likeness in any form, when for years they have said that it would professionalize athletes, it would make them employees of the university. But then when you look at it in the context of sort of this multi-billion-dollar industry, the NCAA has clung to amateurism for since 1906. And in fact has said in court under oath that this would never happen, that it compromises the integrity of college athletics. I certainly differ with that, and it's quite an about face. But still, now that athletes may be allowed to do endorsements, there's still going to be significant restrictions that would say they can't use university marks. They would have to have regulation to make sure that the quote-unquote overzealous booster doesn't give too much money for a commercial, things like that. So it's certainly not a free market system.
So you go from saying this is never going to happen to my watch to all of a sudden they're willing to do it. Why would the NCAA do this now?
Well, they're being dragged into it. The NCAA has lost a number of different court cases where they've basically been ruled in different courts to be a violator of federal antitrust law. The remedies haven't caught up to where some think they should be, including myself.
What do you say, though, to the notion that these are amateurs? These players are amateurs, as the NCAA has long argued. And is it really fair to say also that this only impacts the top-tier elite athletes who are looking to go pro?
Well, first, it doesn't impact just the top athletes. It impacts those that have market value. So you could have some that aren't necessarily going to be future pros that have value in the marketplace with their social media followings, or they're popular for a variety of different reasons. So this goes far beyond just those that are going to be pros in the future. As to the amateurism piece, amateurism, in my view, and I think in the view of most people, has always been a sham. It started in the Victorian age, where the moneyed elites simply didn't want to compete against the common man. That's all it was. And that's been carried forward, and it's been used as an excuse in a game in sort of college sports, which have been commercialized to the tune of billions. And the players for decades have been walking billboards where they're wearing, university-sponsored apparel that the universities and the coaches are being paid by a shoe company, and they're forced to wear this apparel without any compensation. So, look, this is a step forward. It's not far enough, but it's certainly better than what we've been experiencing since 1906.
And lastly, let's just look at this big picture. How will this change the landscape of big-time college sports? And looking specifically at you, for example, how would this have impacted you if you had had this option back when you were playing basketball at Duke?
It would have allowed me to make money while I was in school and to realize my market value. I was one of the players that, as soon as my season was over, my senior year, I signed a contract for a budding cellular company to do a commercial. Along with another player that I played with. And, my value it didn't just start the day after I finished playing. I had value throughout the 4 years. And whether it's Missy Franklin at Cal as a swimmer, or Mia Hamm as a soccer player at the University of North Carolina, or Sabrina Ionescu at Oregon, there are tons of players that have tremendous market value while they're in college. And they should be allowed to realize it, because the NCAA and all the member institutions are realizing upon those athletes' value to their bottom line. And a lot of people have gotten very wealthy off of the athletes. And there's no reason why the athletes shouldn't be allowed to share in that, when literally every other student that they're going to school with is allowed to monetize their name, image, and likeness, and they're allowed to earn or accept whatever they can in the marketplace, and it doesn't affect their status as students.
Jay Bilas, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still ahead on ABC News Live, honoring our heroes even amid the pandemic. The elite guards holding up this American tradition, and a special celebration for one World War II veteran, a birthday he will not soon forget.
Right now, How do you make sense of it all? Now, afternoons on ABC, one place with the good information you need.
We are all in this together, and we're going to get through this together.
Pandemic, what you need to know. Afternoons at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. Friday nights, 9, 8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt, True Crime, 2020. Friday nights, 9, 8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner of 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the most prestigious honor, Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news choice.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, I'm grateful you woke up this morning.
Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning, sunshine. We've been waiting for you. Say good morning. Good morning, sunshine. America. Say good morning. I want you to wake me up.
ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
We know coronavirus has affected many of you.
America has changed for now. There's no question.
George, we are thinking of you, Allie, and the kids.
How are you feeling?
I feel fine, Robin. She wanted to share this message.
You know I'm feverish if I'm on television with no makeup on.
Allie is now on the Roberts family prayer chain.
So grateful that we get to do this from home.
You do know you're sideways, right?
People are finding a way to come together.
We're going to get through this
together.
Right here with you on Good Morning America.
So much of American life has been upended by this pandemic, but tonight one cherished national tradition remains unchanged. Devin Dwyer has that story.
At Arlington National Cemetery, the crowds are gone, but they're still standing watch.
Present. Oh.
Sentinels at the tomb of the unknown soldier, keeping their age-old ritual around the clock. The changing of the guard now with added social distance, but no less commitment to those who died unknown. For 83 years, 30,000 consecutive days, it's a streak coronavirus won't break.
For us, it doesn't matter if it's a hurricane or in this case, if it's a pandemic. We are always here. We are always guarding.
Army Captain Harold Earls commands the guard.
The unknowns deserve that. Our country deserves that. This place represents the very best of this country. Quite frankly, at a time in which we need reminding of what our very best looks like.
When so much else in American life has changed, the watch at Arlington stays the same. 21 steps down the mat, a 21-second pause. 21, a symbol of the highest military honor to those who served and sacrificed.
Do you see a parallel in that honor right now to some of those who are out there battling this virus?
Yeah, so standing here now, I can look out and we see row upon row of headstones, of white headstone markers. Each one of those are heroes. I think equally during this time, there's also heroes that are on the front lines and they're first responders. I think the beautiful thing with this country and in this moment is that during great times of struggle in this country, we've always came together. We've always came out stronger.
The military's old guard showcasing American strength at a time of national crisis. The soldiers, for the first time, wearing masks in their quarters, but taking no shortcuts in their attention to detail. During the ceremony, inspection of the uniform, once an in-your-face affair, now done from a distance. The guard's polished rifle, usually handed over for a closer look, now examined from afar. It's the first national pandemic at the tomb, but the men and women who guard it are no strangers to difficult conditions. They stand watch in torrential downpours, blizzards, heat waves, and ice storms. On September 11, 2001, they held post even as the Pentagon came under attack.
Why is it so important that you stand guard when no one's even here to see you?
The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier represents all unknowns who died, because unknowns, they gave up everything in sacrifice for this country. They died without us even knowing their name. They died without their families even being able to say thank you.
A grateful nation still saying thank you every day at the tomb and grave sites across Arlington. And now, from billboards, balconies, and overpasses to heroes of a different kind.
When we see at 7 p.m., when that shift comes on at night, and you see people hanging out their windows in New York, banging on the pots and pans, that's what makes this country so great. That's what makes us American.
Guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier and a love for country and one another. For ABC News Live, I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington.
Our thanks to Devin. Before we go tonight, our image of the day. Take a look. This is Walter Reed, a World War II veteran from Long Island who just beat COVID-19 in time to turn 100. Walter says the key to longevity is to be nice to your fellow man and treat them right. Some sound advice there. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Good night.
What you need to know right now, the death toll from confirmed cases of COVID-19 across the country now surpasses lives lost in nearly 2 decades of the Vietnam War.